All right, in the last video we did elimination. This one is a continuation of that. Now we did problem number 2 in the last video. I'm going to start this video skipping down to the cooperative group problems, problem number 5. So we have 4x plus 2y equals 10 and 2x minus 3y equals 1. So in this case, again, we have to eliminate either the x's or the y's. So I look at the coefficients. Let's say I want to eliminate, well, let's do the y's again. Here we have one positive and one negative coefficient on the y. We have a coefficient of -3 on the second equation. So I'm going to go up here to this first equation, and I'm going to change that -3 into a +3. So I change the sign on the -3. And then I'm going to go to the second equation, and I'm going to take the +2 that was in front of the y, and I'm going to leave that as a +2. Remember, we have to change the sign on one of these. It's usually easier to change from negative to positive. So I need to take the 2 and the -3, swap sides, swap equations, change the sign on one of them. So I change the -3 to a +3. So there we go. When you multiply, we end up with 12x plus 6y equaling 30 as my new first equation. And as my new second equation, we end up with 4x minus 6y equaling 2. Now we have opposite coefficients on the y's, so we can add things up. If you add 12x plus 4x, you get 16x. If you add 6y and -6y, you get 0. The equal signs stay the same. And then when you add 30 and 2, you end up with 32. So divide both sides by a 16, and x needs to be 2. If x needs to be 2, I go back up to this first equation, and I plug in, 4x plus 2y is equal to 10. So I'm going to plug in a 2 for the x, and then solve. 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 2y equals 10. Subtract 8 from both sides. 2y is equal to 2. Divide both sides by 2. You get y is equal to 1. Now it is just coincidence that my last 3 problems have had y equals 1. That obviously doesn't always happen. So my solution to this problem is the point 2, 1. And you can check that if you want. I haven't done this yet, but you can check that if you want by plugging it back into our 2 original equations. If you plug in 2, 1 here and 2, 1 here, you should get true statements out of both equations. So that's the idea. That's the idea of elimination. Let me do one more problem with elimination. Let's go to number 6 because this has all positive coefficients. We have x plus y equals 6, 3x plus y equals 8. So let's go and solve that one. All right, so I do not have opposite coefficients. By the way, if you want to add the coefficients of 1 to make it easier on yourself, that's fine. Doesn't really matter, but there you go. X plus y equals 6, or 1x plus 1y equals 6. 3x plus 1y equals 8. Now, I'm going to eliminate the y's again, but again, I keep saying you could eliminate the x's. No need to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this first equation, and on the left and right hand sides, both sides, I'm going to say, well, since this coefficient of y was a 1, let's move it up here, and we're going to multiply by -1 on the left and -1 on the right hand side of that equation. Again, notice that I changed the sign from a +1 to a -1. Second equation, Well, my coefficient of y up here is a positive 1. I'm going to keep the sign the same, multiply that by a 1 on the left, and a 1 on the right. Okay, so there we go. My first equation turns into negative 1x minus 1y is equal to negative 6. My second equation turns into 3x plus 1y equals 8. So basically all we really did, multiplying by 1 doesn't change that equation. All right, hopefully you get that. So you take this, since they both started as positives, I had to change one of the sign. I chose to change the number I'm multiplying by the first equation into a negative. So here we go, add up these two equations. We end up with 2x plus 0y is equal to 2. Divide both sides by 2, you get x equals 1. Now I can plug into my equation. Remember, my original equation just said one of my original equations said x plus y equals 6. So if I plug in a 1 for x, it's clear that y has to be 5. So in this case, the solution is the point 1, 5. And that's it. Okay? So this is the elimination method. Coefficient of whichever variable I want to eliminate, take that one, multiply it times my other equation, take this one, multiply it times the first equation, but change the sign from positive to negative or from negative to positive on one of them. There you go.